Hello，你好，Welcome back，欢迎回来to Wisdom Wednesday with Johnny Tiger on June 8, 2022. One of the things that make me feel kind of good, kind of proud of being not just Asian, but Chinese. I know. A lot of people say, aren't you Taiwanese? Well, to me, Taiwanese and Chinese are the same thing. I mean, putting aside the political differences, Taiwanese people, most of us have Chinese blood. And so I consider myself to be Chinese as ethnicity, but uh, Taiwanese or Canadian as nationality. To me, that's quite different. So, as I was saying, one of the things that make me kind of feel good and proud to be Chinese is that when you belong to a people, when you belong to a culture, that is one of the oldest still existing culture in the world. I say still existing because there have been culture older than Chinese culture, but most of them are not here anymore. But Chinese culture is really one of the oldest culture that not only still exists today, but is thriving. It well, depending on who you talk to, slowly taking over the world. Uh, One of the benefits of belonging to a culture like this is you can almost lay claim to everything that's ever been invented. I mean, obviously not truly everything. As we've mentioned before, there were things that actually didn't originate from China. Uh, However, there are a lot of things that if you trace its root back, it did come from Chinese culture. A lot of my friends like to go to Korean food and then they like to uh, order Korean barbecues and pancakes, and let's not even go into where did barbecue come from and pancake come from. But let's just talk about one of the most notorious dish that came out of Korea. One of the things that almost everybody associate with Korea, kimchi. Now, I can't really tell you if kimchi itself originated from China, but I can tell you that the idea of pickling vegetables and living off of those pickled vegetables has been around in China for thousands and thousands of years. So today I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about one of the most popular, most common pickled vegetable, one of the almost household staples in Chinese history, in Chinese culture, a kind of Chinese kimchi called 咸菜 or uh, 芥菜 to be more specific. 咸菜 means pickle in Chinese language. So when you say 咸菜, you're talking about pickled anything basically. 咸 means uh, salty. 菜 means vegetable. Although in some contexts, 菜 can also just mean dishes. This dish, that dish. Uh, it can mean 菜. Uh, for example, if we are at the dinner table and I say, hey, don't be shy, 吃菜. I'm not saying eat the vegetable. I'm saying just enjoy the food, enjoy any dish, any food. Just uh, let yourself be at home. Don't be shy. Eat whatever you want. 吃菜 means eat uh, food in this case, even though 菜 most of the time means vegetable. So 咸菜 means pickled vegetable, and within the pickled vegetable for Chinese people, the most commonplace, the household staple is 芥菜, aka Chinese mustard. Now, if you don't know what that is, it's also known by many other names. It's called Indian mustard. It's also called brown mustard. In Taiwan, we know Chinese mustard or jiacai mostly as hong, a very beautiful name for this rather questionable vegetable, actually. Questionable because jiacai or Chinese mustard is not a very good tasting vegetable. That's why we pickle it because you know that's in the old days that's the only way we could make people eat it. Why is it called hong? Hong, direct translation, the red in the snow. And this brings us back to why do Chinese people eat this vegetable particularly? Why so many Chinese people eat this vegetable, even though it kind of tastes pretty awful? It has a very spicy, very strong mustard taste to it, and it tastes kind of awful raw and tastes even worse after you cook it. Why do people eat that when it's so awful tasting? Because in the old days, there was no greenhouses, there was no uh, science lab, and all these new technologies for you to grow your vegetable. So, which means if it was summertime, you can only grow vegetables that could grow in the heat. If it was wintertime, well, you're kind of limited to what vegetable you could get because it's too cold. However, Chinese mustard was one of the vegetables that no matter how cold the winter gets, the land can be covered in snow, but you will see this field of red. I guess that's a brownish red of these Chinese mustard in the field. So they are called the red in the snow. No matter how cold the weather would be, the Chinese mustard would prevail, and you would be able to at least have some green in your diet. So that resulted in people come to try to find a way to eat them because they were the most plentiful during those long, cold, harsh winter months. However, even before people started eating jiacai, aka Chinese mustard, that's Jeachai, jiacai. Before people started eating them, people already found a use for these obnoxious vegetables. In the old days, a lot of carrot and radish farmers, potato farmers, watermelon farmers would surround their field with a big circle of jiacai, of Chinese mustard. They would grow whatever is it that they're growing, potato, watermelon, etc., etc., in the center, and then they would grow a big patch, big circular patch of Chinese mustard surrounding the main crop. This was because, let's say you're a carrot farmer, and people who walk by your field sometimes would say, "Oh, well, we don't have carrot for dinner. Let's go and pick a couple carrots." Well, I mean, that's okay because honestly, people don't really eat enough carrots to do that much of a damage. But what if it's not just one person? What if it's 20 people doing that? What if rather than people, it's uh, cattle and sheep or goat or horses are going past your field and just decide, oh, those carrots look nice and juicy. Let's go have ourselves a party. Well, that can ruin your entire crop. That can ruin your harvest, which means it will directly impact your family and income. Your entire crop can be ruined. So Chinese people quickly figured out, okay, these brown mustard, these jiacai, these Chinese mustard, tasted really bad. People didn't want to eat them. Animals didn't want to go near them. So if we surround the field with them, that's a great deterrent. to keep horses and cattle and sheep away from the field because they think that it's just a field of Chinese mustard and they'll stay clear. And this would even act as a deterrent for people because people walk by, oh, they see a Chinese mustard, and they, okay, there's nothing there. There's nothing worthwhile in there. So they would leave the field alone. So that was the earliest use of jiecai, of Chinese mustard, was as a deterrent for people or animals from ruining the crop. Eventually, by the Zhou dynasty, about 3,000 years ago, uh, there were several really bad winters where uh, people were running out of food, people were starving. So more and more people started looking at these obnoxious vegetables and said, hey, these things are everywhere. Like even when snow and ice out there, we can still grow it. So let's find a way to eat this. However, as I mentioned, when you eat it raw, it tastes really bad. So people started trying to cook it. It tasted just worse. Not to mention it smelled really bad when you were cooking them. So someone came up with the idea, why don't we try pickling it? Maybe that will neutralize the taste. And lo and behold, that started Chinese people down the long road, thousands of years of eating pickled Chinese mustard. Even up to the last 200 years or so, Chinese people, uh, especially the more poor household, I'm just washing my hand. That's why you have the water sound. I put my hand on the counter and it's kind of a coffee ground from when I was making coffee earlier. So yeah, even for the last 200 years, especially the more poverty-stricken family in China, a lot of them would have a huge tub, and I'm not just talking about a bathtub. I'm talking about a tub big enough that you can drown a person in, like huge aquarium-sized tub. A lot of them would have a tub, or they would dig a really deep hole in their backyard, and then they would have that filled with uh, pickled jiecai. And we already mentioned in past episodes where a lot of Chinese people didn't have money to eat meat every day. Meat was a luxury, something that you maybe only come across 3 or 4 times a year. So a lot of people, their daily life consists of rice or noodle or some kind of Chinese pastry or bread, flatbread for the most part, and then they eat that with the pickled jiecai. Now, when you pickle jiecai, it's not like uh, how you see people pickling vegetables nowadays, where they just take a raw vegetable and then put it in the jar and then fill it up with boiling water and vinegar and soy sauce and or whatever, and call that a day. Pickling jiecai is a lot more involved. First, before you start pickling, you got to sun dry the jiecai. You got to leave it out in the sun. Make sure the birds and the insects don't get to it. Uh, Even though most likely they don't because it doesn't taste very good. So you leave it out in the sun and let it dry, let the sun leach all the moisture out of it. After it is dried in the sun, then you chop it up into spears and then put it in the tub or whatever container you're using. And then you boil water with vinegar, half water, half vinegar. You put that in, and then you also need to add uh, whole peppercorn, and this is a very important step. You got to add salt, but not just any salt. It has to be sea salt. Now, don't ask me why, because I don't understand the chemistry behind it either. But if you do it with regular salt, it doesn't taste the same. You have to do it with sea salt to have that the right amount of saltiness and tartness and the right kind of taste in the end. Now, some people will just pickle a lot of this Chinese mustard, this 芥菜, and then fish them out, scoop out a little bit every time you need to have noodle or rice, and then you just put it over the noodle and rice, and that will give you enough flavor for your noodle or rice. When I was little, we did that a couple of times. Obviously, for me, we didn't do it because it was a necessity. We did it because we enjoyed the flavor of 雪里红 or 芥菜. Um, it's great in noodle, in ramen noodle, in stir-fried noodle and stuff like that. Just a little bit of it will give you a lot of flavor in your food. It's great. However, older people usually don't like to eat it straight out of the jar like that because it's a little bit too crunchy, and people who don't have a lot of teeth or don't like to chew their food that much find it too much work to eat. So older people enjoy their pickled 芥菜 cooked. So here is how you cook that. You want to put a cup of water and a cup of the brine, the liquid from the pickle in the pot, and you bring that to the boil, and you throw the pickled vegetable in there and cook it until it is mushy. Right? Don't add anything else because all the flavor is already in the juice and the vegetable itself. However, you can also add some soybean in this if you want some protein, and you can eat this in three stages. First, you can fish out the now very well cooked 芥菜 and just have it over rice or noodle like that. It's so mushy by this stage, you don't even have to chew it. Just put it in your mouth and stir it with your tongue and it will fall apart. Next, you take out the soybean that you cooked with the 芥菜, and then you put those soybean in a little mason jar or in a deep dish and set it aside. And these soybeans are now carrying the flavor of the pickled 芥菜, and they're really tasty. They make a great snack food for people, especially when they're drinking beer. And then you still have the broth left. Don't throw that away. Take that broth and keep it in the fridge. And anytime you have plain rice or just cook some plain noodle, you can put a little scoop of that broth over your rice or noodle, and then add some fresh sliced cucumber or celery, and it's quite delicious. So you see, if you cook your pickled 芥菜, pickled Chinese mustard, you can get a lot of use out of that. Not only the commoners, not only the poor people ate pickled 芥菜, but even royalties ate pickled Chinese mustard. They, of course, ate it in a little bit more elaborate, fancy fashion. It was said whenever the xian cai or jie cai was served to the Chinese emperor, it had to come in three dishes. One dishes, one dish would have the jie cai finely chopped, like almost shredded. And one dish would have it in slices, and the third dish would have it in spears. And then the first dish would be served with sugar, the second dish would be served with hot sauce, and the third dish would be served with vinegar. And you can eat it in different flavor, different texture, and different shape. like that. Now, obviously, that is just mostly for the noblemen, for the royalties. Commoners almost never ate it like that because it's too much work. Have to do three dishes in three different shapes and three different flavors of pickled mustard. Before I go, I'm going to leave you with a really great recipe of how to use Chinese pickled Chinese mustard, and you can try that. And it's one of the dishes that I really really enjoyed when I was a kid. Here is how you do it. You need uh, ground pork or shredded pork. You need ginger, garlic, green onion, the three staples in Chinese cooking. You need some cooking oil. You need some sugar, brown sugar, white sugar, doesn't matter. And you need, of course, some pickled, already pickled Chinese mustard. And you need also some pickled Chinese pickled cucumbers. I'm stressing Chinese pickled cucumbers because even though it's just regular cucumbers, their solution is a little bit different. So regular American or European pickles not going to taste the same. Okay, you need Chinese pickled cucumber. It's usually got a little bit more soy sauce, a little bit more soy sauce in it, and it has a little bit of a sweet taste. So this is how you do it. You take two bowls. In one bowl, you have sliced up pickled mustard, and the other bowl you have sliced up pickled uh, cucumber. And you want to run these under water for a couple of minutes, just so it wash as much of the juice and salt and all that out of them, and then try to dry them as best as you can, so and set them aside. In a big wok, you put in some oil, you heat up the oil, throw in the green onion, ginger, and garlic, and start to brown the meat. When the meat started brown, you toss in the pickled Chinese mustard and start stir frying. Don't add any more salt or pepper or anything because most of that flavor will come from the pickled vegetable itself. When your meat is about 80% done, it's right before you turn off the fire and take it off the fire, you stir in the Chinese pickled cucumber and give it a nice big stir and toss so everything's mixed in together. And then before you take it off the fire, after you turn off the fire, but before you remove the wok from the stove, stir in a couple of tablespoons of sugar. And then you can serve this over again rice, noodle, or if you want, eat it with some flat bread, and it's really super delicious. If you try this and like it, let me know. Thank you for checking out today's Wisdom Wednesday. I'll be back again tomorrow for some Toy Thursday goodies. For now, 谢谢 and 再见。